some really cool photos and videos of sustainable settings, which has been your life's passion for how long now?
25.
25 years, a quarter, or as we say in the realm of history, a quarter of a century.
I guess that is, isn't it?
Something like that.
Couple decades or better.
A couple decades or better, and sustainable settings has come to a crossroads of sorts at this point. So we're here to talk about sustainable settings, what you've done, what you've accomplished, why you're at that crossroads now, and then what's in the future for sustainable settings. So tell us a little bit, for people that aren't familiar with you and with sustainable settings, which is going to be people from outside the valley, because everybody in the valley knows sustainable settings. If they don't, they should. They've been living under a rock if they don't know. But tell us a little bit about sustainable settings, its mission, what it's achieved over the last quarter of a century, and how you then plan to further that mission.
Okay. Do you want a little history how we got here?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Rose and I were artists before we came to the valley, and potters, sculptors.
Okay.
And the studio was always laboratory, not a place to manufacture product, but a place to discover.
Right.
Take risks.
Mm-hmm.
Rose always says, make new mistakes, you know.
Right.
And so we're surrounded by a lot of folks making the same mistake over and over again. So,
yes, we are.
So we're kind of out there on the land right now, doing a lot of unconventional things. Nothing dangerous, but just different. And we're trying things. We're taking risks. But we were potters, sculptors, and I was teaching in academia, and we got a Fulbright to go to Ghana, West Africa, to study the Garunsi culture, and really more about human settlement than about pots or art.
Okay.
And we found ourselves interested in their architecture, and we lived with them for 9 months, and one family, and watched from the land purification rituals all the way to the completion of a large dwelling made out of earthen compound. And they didn't have a word for art. And I was, hot shit master's degree from the West.
Right.
In art. And that kind of chipped away at my understanding of reality.
Right.
So we came back to the States in '90 after that, and I stopped signing my name to the work. And we became Life in General. Brook, Rose, Cooper, whoever, and sometimes 2,000 people, depending on. So the work became less precious object.
Okay.
Museum kind of stuff, and more about art as a mechanism for social change, a stimulant.
Okay.
And so we did installations. We came to your community, and we said, we have these skills. We're artists. We understand metaphor and form and color and all these other things,
Mm-hmm.
And what could we co-create?
Okay.
And that would be meaningful to you, not some bent steel thing that I'm going to drop in your park, some ego deal.
Right.
And so the work became more and more social or cultural or community-based.
Okay.
Along the way. And then there's some academic stuff. I taught at Pomona College, Claremont, University of Connecticut, and James Madison in Virginia, and those were formative. But the work started to change. It was no longer this solo object genius crap.
Okay.
And so we did that for a bit, and then got another grant to go to China. And
what year was this?
This in about '96, where we head over to China.
Mainland China?
Huh?
Mainland China.
Mainland. I mean, we went in through Hong Kong, and it was still China.
Right.
Or it was still English.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was the last year of the lease, the 100-year lease.
Right.
And so when we came out, Hong Kong was China.
Wow.
So we were at that point, and there was these social economic incentives. We'd call it capitalism, but going in, the shelves on all the stores were, all the product was just sitting on the edge and make the store look full,
Right.
and nothing behind them, and one or two kinds of soap or whatever. And on the way back out, it was mass production, crazy, just like
wow,
like here,
uh-huh,
like 40 brands of soap, so there was, what we heard when we were on the river was, we heard the news of this happening, and somebody said, oh, we can have more than one pig, the farmers, and we can grow 10% of whatever we want. You're not just a Napa cabbage grower anymore. You could actually have a little entrepreneurial incentive. And so that was a big shift.
Okay.
Anyway, so that grant was to go see the source of the Yellow River, Huang Ho, up on the Tibetan Plateau, and follow the river out for 4,000 miles. And there's some maps that we'll pull up here, and you can see where we went. And so Rose and Cooper, who's now 31, I guess, was 5. He turned 6 on this trip. This was Huck Finn,
No kidding.
It was, we went to the source, and we were with Tibetans, way up high on the Tibetan Plateau. Went to the glaciers, and we could drink it. I mean, it was potable trickle up there. And then we walked with them until it became, we dropped off the Tibetan Plateau, and then we got into Han culture, the dominant culture there, and the river became navigable. And we stopped there in Ningxia, and we met an old guy, and he was building these goatskin rafts. And so as I said, the entry into the culture was to learn how to build these things that they built, and they would teach us about their culture.
Right, like Africa, like the Africa
Just like
experience. Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the African buildings that we were engaged in. So we went down to the river, met a shepherd, bought 14 goats, and the old guy taught us how to slaughter the animal so that the skin would be more whole, not just ripped open like for meat.
Okay.
And so we would cut it specific, and we'd fill it with oil and salt and roll it in the sun for about 3 weeks till it became like an inner tube.
Okay.
And then we lashed those 14 to a frame, and you can see the picture. And then we shot the river on this homemade thing. And when I look at that picture of my wife and kid on this bloody thing, I think, wow.
What was I thinking?
I was crazy. And it probably says more about Rose than it does about me. She's amazing.
Okay.
And so we've done all this stuff together. We've been together 38 years. So.
Okay.
Anyway, we came back from that, and as usual, if we ever go out, we pretty much come home broke and have to start over,
Right.
So I applied for some teaching jobs, and I applied for another grant, another Fulbright, and I got the grant to go to India to study the carved terracotta temples outside of the Hindi carved terracotta temples outside of Calcutta, and so it's kind of always related to clay and or the art,
right,
which is getting away from classical art, is always about human settlement and about who are we.
Right.
So it's studio. It's like just the world is now the studio.
Okay.
And we're asking these questions like, how do we fit into the scheme of things, and who are we, and what are we capable of is kind of a fundamental, essential question for sustainable settings. So when the interns are coming in, it's like, well, so what are we capable of?
So talk a little bit about how these experiences kind of synthesized into the decision and the idea, the concept of sustainable settings, and then how you managed to get that moving and have executed that now for 25 years.
So we're right there. Right. So we come back, and it's Doug K. Spear at the Anderson Ranch Arts Center who says, hey, you're in between grants, you got some time, why don't you, and you kind of, don't have much, you don't have a job.
Right.
And he said, why don't you come and do a series, do some work. We'll give you clay and fire and help and studio and living space for you and your kid, your wife and kid. And so that brought us to the Valley. And he said, well, you can do a body of work, we'll have a show. So we ended up doing that. Okay. Thank you, Doug and Anderson Ranch. Mm-hmm. And so that brought us here. And
that was what year?
That was in 97.
97, okay.
That was April and May.
Okay.
And so we did that. We had a show at the Aspen Museum. The body of work went to the BMOCA, which is the Boulder Contemporary Art Center. And during that time, we were getting ready to go to India for this other thing, and we're still pretty tired from travel. Not really wanting to go again, but that's kind of what we had.
Okay.
And I was interviewing like at UC Davis and some other good teaching jobs, but I didn't want to go back into academia. We knew that the China was a turning point, which actually was the intention of the grant. That came out of the Durfee Foundation, which was a visionary grant. It was avocational. I couldn't have studied ceramics or art in China. It had to be adventure travel. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah, so they funded that. But so we got back here, and we're at the Anderson Ranch, and we're ending our term there. And I just interviewed at UC Davis. I didn't want to go, and I think it was Allegheny Meadows or Doug. One of them said, "You should go to Wooded Creek. Your social art stuff and all that, and there's that hippie school across the valley, and there's Hunter S. in the neighborhood, and there's all these other people there, and it's this enclave of, maybe self-proclaimed radicals, but some of them were pretty radical.
Yes, they were.
And it was that fit for us a little bit, that idea. And so we went over there, and we met George Stranahan and Patty and Deb Jones and Rick Morrison and the folks that were up there doing that work. And Dan Troutman was there at the time. And so George said, well, you got these few months between going to India. Why don't you be the visiting artist here? And so it's kind of just, we're in the flow. We're just taking what we can get. And,
And so for people who don't know, in Wooded Creek, what was the actual organization you were working with then?
Well, it was called ARF, or ARF, but it turned into Compass.
Right.
And this is the Aspen Community School, which is K through 8. Right. There's a preschool there, and Linda did that.
Where my daughters went to school.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And Cooper ended up doing 8 years there.
Yep.
And Shepherd started in the preschool before we moved down to Carbondale. So it was during those 2 months, George said, hey, be a visiting artist. You just have to have an apprentice, clean up that little Adobe studio, and you can live in the apartment. So we've been in the Valley 25 years and never paid rent.
Okay, well, you're probably pretty much the only one that's been able to make that work.
Well, so this evolved, and so we do the 2 months. It's awesome. Laura Smith, who's a potter in the area, she's Tom Smith's wife, his lawyer, but she was my apprentice in the pottery at the time. And so out front was Jerome Ostentowski of Crimpy, or Central Rocky Mountain Permaculture Institute, had years ago put in some raised beds up there. He was always moving before he got his own place. And so these beds were laying empty, and we would throw dirt in an alley, in Omaha, and always grew something wherever we went. So it's kind of part of us. But so we said, hey, we want to light these beds back up, and so I need some compost. So George said, well, go to the ranch 2 miles down the road, more towards Lanedo there, and there's a pile of 5-year-old steer manure. I said, okay. And you meet Jesse Steinler, and he'll hook you up. And go, you know. So we met Jesse, and this is the moment, right? And I'm driving big red dump truck, and he's got the tractor with the scoop on the front, and our kid Cooper's riding on the fender of the tractor, and they're in front of me. And we go down and we're coming out of Collins Creek, and we cross Woody Creek, and I hit that Woody Creek, and it was like, boom, this is the place. It's like that.
Okay.
Went home, wrote up a 6-page proposal. We called it Sustainable Settings.
Right out of the box, you call it. That's what you call it.
Right out of the box, we call it. We knew we needed to find a place and heal it. We knew our medium was no longer clay or all these other things. It was soil and it was health.
Right.
And so that became find a place and heal it. See if we could, after 70 years of, you know, abuse.
Right.
In all of our relationships with the life, right, and the soil and all that, that could we actually heal a place and bring it back to vitality and our health too. This is the root of our immune deficiency.
Absolutely.
You know, our immune. What is it? What's the other word we don't use very much is immune. Anyway, it's the opposite.
The autoimmune you're talking about, or not
there's
autoimmune issues?
There's immune deficiency, and then there's immune vitality or whatever.
Okay.
But so the idea was like that's where it hit, and so we went to the board. We went to George first, and he was visionary, you know.
George Stranahan,
and so he heard our 6-page. He heard our proposal, and he was like, "Well," he said, "let's say we're building a house. I see your house." He said, it's all stick framed. He said, the kitchen's done. The bedrooms are just framed out, and the bathroom you haven't. You know, he's telling me, you got some things figured out, and you don't have other things.
Right.
But I can see how you can figure it. So he was like that.
Right.
And so he said, well, I like this, and it's a good fit up here with the kids. You know, the kids can bring their lunch waste up here to feed the chickens, and you know, and then we designing wetland waste treatment, and we're doing, you know, growing things, and we did early design work to make all the teacher housing run on the sun. Right?
Okay.
And this is in '98.
Right.
So the word sustainable and the word green 25 years ago was not even in our lexicon, really. Which is hard to believe now because I think Monsanto's sustainable or whatever.
So they say.
Right?
Yeah.
And so this was not in common usage, right?
Right.
And there's times I kind of regret naming the organization that because everything became sustainable. But it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the idea was settings, we talked through the years with the board about having satellites in other places, other biomes, to prove it in other places. It was always part of the plan,
Right.
which we'll come back to.
Right. How did you end up? So from Woody Creek, then, how did you end up moving or settling on the parcel of land that you ended up with?
Well,
which is not in Woody Creek.
We took that idea, and we sat on a boulder with an angel right there before the board meeting. And they said, I sat there with this angel who wishes to remain anonymous to this day. And I told him what we needed to do. And he said, we all need to do this. How much do you need? And I wasn't smart enough to say 14 million, but I said, not that would have materialized.
Well, this is 1998, too, right? So.
Right. So I said, well, the first year's $185,000, and he said, it's in the bank, let's try it. And I still get goosebumps, you know.
Yeah.
And I walked into that board meeting, and they said, we love this. It's a great fit with the students and the art center and the wood shop and, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And this is really a good fit. But we don't have any money. And I said, well, I just got a pledge for the first year. And they said, shoot, let's go. And so that's how we got our footing. We didn't know anyone in the valley. We came here with a 1979 Volvo wagon with backpacks from China with no money, and so it just started to roll.
Yep.
Right. And so we were up there for 5 or 6 years. And George and Patty let us build an experimental straw bale home, one of the first in the valley. Ran on the sun. You know, we bought 1 quart of aspen firewood, and after the 6th or 7th year, we're moving out, and we still had 1 fire left out of that quart.
Wow.
It just worked.
Yeah.
And you got to remember, we don't know what we're doing.
Well, it's a laboratory, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
even Rose looked at me. She said, "You can't build a house." I said, "Okay, let's go." That's all the motivation I needed. So but they let us do that, take that risk. He was like, "Yeah, go for it." He said, "If you don't," he said, we did it on a wager. You know, George liked to wager.
Yeah.
And so he said, "You know what? What's this going to cost me?" And I said, $50 a square foot. And he said, "You're going to ask me for more money. I'll bet you $10 you ask me for more money." Man, I took that bet.
Yep.
And I lost. And I gave him $10 and he gave me 10 grand and we finished the house for 60, which is pretty good.
Still pretty good.
But I didn't get paid, but we built it. And we did it the way he always was like, "It's your deal." I would say, "What about this?" He goes, and I said, "Okay, now you and Patty are going to have to live with the color. Do you want brown or you want off-white?" And Patty picked kind of ivory or white for the stucco. But anyway, so we got a chance, and that was a chance to demonstrate the ideas a little bit. We could bring people there and they could see how, geez, you could build a house that ran on the sun.
And this house is still there.
House is still there, but there's a new owner. So I wonder if it survived. But it did survive the county. George turned himself in after a while, wanting to sell the place, I guess, and it was 85% banded up there,
Yeah.
including the place. We shook hands, and I broke ground. I mean, we didn't.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, there's probably a whole other story in that.
There's lots of story there, but so anyway, that was our start. And
so were you working in the soil up there, or were you?
Oh yeah.
So
we're designing greenhouses. We're designing run-on-the-sun chicken coops and offices and even toilets. Outdoor hue manure.
So this is the predecessor to the final
We're implementing
location.
the ideas as best we can there.
Okay.
We're designing the teacher housing. We're on the 200 acres, and yeah, we got a chance to do that, and we started hosting CU architecture and planning department. We're new enough in this that most architecture departments, and CU included, was more about kind of crashed airplane Frank Gehry bullshit. Sorry.
Okay.
And so
you're stretching the limits of my understanding of architecture, let alone jokes about architecture. So,
well, anyway, not so functional,
right?
And certainly not environmental in concern. I mean,
I
think Gary would take a piece of foil, crumble it, and say, "Okay, there's our building." Just crap.
Yeah.
Ego bullshit.
Okay.
But anyway, so there was one faculty member at CU who was getting wind of this kind of green building idea. It was kind of new, and RMI. Was already starting. They were publishing the book called Green Building.
Rocky Mountain
It was all pretty new.
Yep.
So we had design sessions up there with Randy Udall and all these other people would come, and 12 architects, I invited Harry Teague and a bunch of other architects to this one design session. And he came, he told me later, he said, "I came because George asked me to come." He said, "I figured I'd be running this place in an hour. This whole session," but he said this was awesome, and he said my competitors were all there, from the valley, but he said we started to really collaborate, and that's the whole idea, was collective intelligence, and upfront design, and so we kind of broke all the molds a little bit like that, and.
So before we move on into the final destination for sustainable settings out there on Highway 133, just talk a little bit about, just try and tie it all together. I mean, your experiences, your grounding in art, your grounding in the earth, in functional art that is related to life and source, and how that transitioned into this idea that we're going to go into a long-term committed decision to use this experience as motivation to heal a patch of dirt for future generations.
Yeah. Well, we came to terms with the idea that we're really all agrarians, whether we like it or not.
Kind of have to be.
The Africans,
ultimately,
we have to be.
Yeah.
We can't go back to hunter-gatherer. There's too many of us. And so we need to start behaving. We're not doing a very good job of that. And we're just bigger machines and stronger poisons. And just, it's failing big ag is failing by the day.
Yeah.
And that idea of dominance, we could get into where that comes from. See, the other day, you know how you unsubscribe from all the crap coming
every day,
right?
I do that. Yep.
Well, about a couple years ago, I unsubscribed from the Western paradigm.
Okay.
It's we went off the rails with the Enlightenment around 1650.
Okay, that's a long time ago.
That is, but that's when we lost track of myth and meaning and all these other things, and we let science become our new mythology. And science is just our current imagination.
Okay.
It's a good tool, but it's not all. And we threw the baby out with the bathwater. And so what this turned into was farming at the place horizontally, doing things that, rotational grazing and compost and all these good things.
Right.
Those are the horizontal. And we have to have that in place. But what we lit up was the vertical. And you could call it consciousness or spiritual, you could call it whatever your metaphors are. But we started to build a relationship with spirit, soul, and our etheric sense, and our physical being. And when we started to do that, our soil tests went off the charts. And this is about the time NRCS is starting to take tests and monitor us for 7 years.
So let's talk a minute about that. We're jumping ahead a little bit, probably.
Yeah, that is.
But just since you brought it up, I mean, Sustainable Settings has been a kind of scientific laboratory for the last 20 or so years. And so you have data that demonstrates the results of the work that you've done to heal the land and to improve what the land is able to deliver in terms of nutrition, in terms of its ability to support and sustain life, right?
Yes. I mean, for us, it was because of our educational mission and because of really wanting to, if we do figure something out, be able to share it, especially in a community or in a culture that is like science only, or more so. We knew we needed to be scientific. And so I always bring, even though things get a little maybe mystical at times, planetary rhythms and things like that, I always go,
science is a form
this is nitrogen, this is carbon, this is...
The scientific method is a form of inquiry that we use to help us gauge and evaluate over time what's going to work and what's not going to work. But it is one form of inquiry.
It is not infallible,
it is not infallible because humans who created science, who created the scientific method, are not infallible, right?
Yeah.
So I hear you there.
And there's like a little ego in there, my theory, and I protect my theory. So it takes a funeral to wake up. We got to get rid of. Even Einstein talked about. He took math to consciousness, and he said spooky actions.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Heidegger said, if you drink from the glass of the earth sciences, you would be an atheist. But at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. So these guys were quantum mechanics.
Yeah.
And they took it as far as they could. And they got to this threshold. It was like, there's something going on that we can't really explain. So we use science. We use the laboratory tests. We worked with NRCS. They are very science-based.
Right.
But then we also dowse, use copper rods. We've learned other ways to measure. We have chefs that are telling us your food is untouchable. It has a terroir, like in wine. Okay. The taste of a place.
Right.
And they said, we work with your food, and your broccoli or cauliflower backs me up and makes me work with it instead of do my number on it. Stuff like that. Okay. Barclay Dodge, we've worked with closely at Bosque. Mark Fisher.
Right.
And these other chefs, we've had a ball working with them, and they all go, Mark Fisher says, "Do you know how to raise a pig?"
Right.
And so it's not cutting corners.
Right.
And so anyway.
So let's go back.
Go back a little bit,
and
So we're at the point where we're leaving Woody Creek.
Right.
And we approached the group and we said, we're going to spin off. And they said, "What's that mean?" I go, "Well, we just need our website and our name and our files." And they had a board meeting and said, "Yeah, you can do that." So they were incubating other projects.
Sure.
And that gave us a model too. And so we became an incubator too.
Well, and that was one of George's big things, right? He was all about helping people help themselves and to get to, his legacy lives on in that regard in this valley. So, yeah. But yes.
So that was a real gift.
Yeah.
And we're very grateful to he and Patty and his brother, Michael, and many others. But we have had tremendous community support. There's always never enough money and things, but right. We're still here 25 years later because we've managed what we've been given. Mm-hmm. There's been some close years.
Yep.
But that's true about anything, but we're still here. And so the move was they let us go. We could spin off, and we took a whole year, and we said little board we formed said blue sky. They were like, "This is working. Where does it belong?" Just because you started here doesn't mean that it needs to be here.
Right.
So we went from Maine to Oregon. It took a year. Ben Walton and I drove 4,000 miles in Montana alone. And he was on the board at that time. And so visionary. And so then we came back to the valley, and this place was not on the market, was off for the winter, Mm-hmm. That little trick the realtors play.
Yep.
And it was going to go back on March. And so we went over there in the fall, and they'd just taken it off the market. And we found it on the internet. We said, "Well, feels pretty good." And we only walked 12 people out there. And we had the board came up with 257,000. And that impressed Adam Lewis and Peter Lewis. And they joined the board and gave 2.1 to buy the land.
The Lewises, yeah.
Right. And so that gave the organizations a land base that it needed. And
this parcel it's on Highway 133.
It's a gem.
It's south of Carbondale, Colorado.
Yep.
And so you did all this travel, and you ended up
back.
Right back, pretty much
in the valley.
In the valley. Not exactly where you started, but pretty close. And so just talk a little bit about the property, just so people can orient themselves.
So the property is 244 acres. Now, it was originally 400. And then so across the road and across the river was the other 200.
Okay.
And this was settled by Thompsons.
Right.
First, it's Ute, of course. The valley was a sacred hunting ground of the Ute. And they were driven out in 1880s, early 1800s, and 1880. Yeah, and so the Thompsons were running the jack trains, transporting stuff from mine camps down to Denver, and so there are no roads to speak of.
Right.
And they had scoped the area out. And they came to settle in that valley. And so in Carbondale, the Thompson name, there's historic buildings and all this stuff now. And our neighbor, Sewell, is actually Thompson blood. And he's got 1,200 acres there.
Okay.
And he's fifth generation. His kids are sixth.
Okay.
So there's that kind of thing. And the old settlement cabin's still there and all that.
Right.
We're not there to, be a pioneer village and eat succotash and talk funny,
Right.
But it's nice to have the history.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so our plan was always to renovate those cabins and preserve them and have a little historic district. And that's part of our tour. And so it's 244 acres that we took on, and open space kept the 100 across the road, and then and the 80 across the creek.
Picken County Parks and Open Space.
Yeah, Picken County Open Space and Trails.
Open Space and Trails.
Kept that.
Yeah.
So what had happened was Thompson settled. They had it from 1880, whatever, at the Homestead Act there, and they had it till 49, and then the Mott's family bought it, and they had it till about 92, and they sold it for $2 million, and they just were high as kites, for the whole 440, and they, I think it was Bill Fales said he went over to the house after they had left, and it was like lunch and dinner was still on the table, like they were abducted. He said they got their $2 million and just flew the coop. Bolted. But anyway, so that's the Thompsons into Mott's, and then Joti and Andre Ulrich, who were well known in the Upper Valley, I think, bought it, and they subdivided the place up, and there were 7 35-acre lots running down our side of the highway. You can imagine.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
15,000 at that point. Aspen or Pitkin County saying, well, your square foot limit's 15,000, square feet per 35, which is huge.
Right.
But they eventually got down to 5,750, which is, I wouldn't know what to do with that much space. But, so that was slated. They started to sell off these 35 acres. And the county open space partnered with the Maryland Conservation Fund, if I got that history right. And they bought it so that they could, actually it was the Maryland umbrella that allowed them to find a buyer to keep it agricultural.
Okay.
There are a couple proposals or what do you call it, offers, more equine folk. And we showed up, and I remember Dale Will said, well, you got till March
to find
the money.
That's when it goes back on the market.
Before we have to put it on the market. So you got that window, and we had $60,000 in the bank.
Right.
So we put together a brochure and proposed what we're going to do there. And that's when we got the funding to buy the ground. And so then we're land rich.
Yep.
Tough.
Yeah, and this is
tough.
What
this
year?
is 2003.
2003.
March of 2003.
March of 2003.
Yeah, so we're land rich, and I don't know if folks know what that means, but
it means you're cash poor.
That's right. And so, not complaining, mind you.
Right.
But we inherited a turn of the century, and I don't mean 21st.
Yeah, the other century. The last century.
And I mean, there was 100 watt or 100, what is it, watt line power going to the house.
Okay.
That's it. Right. I mean, most houses today are 400 plus.
Right.
Anyway, so it was a lot of old infrastructure. And,
a lot of work to do just to get to the point where you can start to do your work.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the house was indoor camping.
Right.
At the time. You could poke your finger right through the wood. And all the windows were real single pane they were running. You know how glass over time will run a little bit?
Yeah.
And we had to use packing tape the first couple winters, double-sided to close the gap to even hold heat in the house. And anyway, all those early stories. But so we moved in there, and they say the sad joke is if you want to make $1 million in agriculture, start with 2.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that. We didn't have that kind of blessing, but we had ground, and we had a lot of energy, and we kept fundraising, and so we've made it all these 19 years now. But
and so what have you been doing out there for the last 20 years? It's a lot. There's a lot that goes on that has been going on out there.
Oh yeah. Well, the mission is to research, demonstrate, and educate. So it's always, there's always this. So if it's time to build something, it's a workshop. We do timber frame workshop.
Right.
If it's time to put in a solar system, it's also an educational opportunity. Kids come, all the time. Every school in the valley's been there, and frequently some of them, many of them. Aspen, kindergarten.
Right.
From there on up.
Right.
And which is a bit of a haul for them, but they'll come, and so we would. Rose and I would be the teachers, and I'd take them out into the pasture and talk about solar energy. And the pastures are collectors. They're only 3% efficient, but it's all solar,
right.
Run on the sun. And Rose would teach them about chickens and their cycles. And so we talked to the little kids about circles and cycles. And then we've run an intern program, which is kind of grad level. So these are 24 to 35 or 40-year-olds that are out in the culture enough that they know they want something different.
Okay.
And so there is that thread in the culture of awareness, and that there's a need for this. I love teaching grad school, and in art school,
Right.
So I love that level.
Mm-hmm.
We encourage, we celebrate their, of course, independence and their doubt.
Right.
And we encourage insubordination. And so it's that.
I believe it.
The mentorship is like that.
Yeah.
If you're not questioning me, you shouldn't believe anything I say.
Right.
You don't trust me, don't believe anything I say. So we teach like that, and take chances. You want to use the plow that way? Okay.
So what are the chances you've taken over the last 20 years? Because you've got cows out there, you've got chickens, you've got all kinds of crops you've been growing. So talk a little bit about the agricultural side of the enterprise.
Well, the overarching idea is that we're there to take risks, of course, and there's always opportunity to engage. And so each time we go, we got to do this. We're going to do this. How?
Right.
And so how is it conventionally done in the industrial model, and then how is it done in human economy, and how is it done in nature's economy?
Okay.
And so for all these years, we've been navigating the knife edge of the human economy and nature's economy, and they're quite different. They don't necessarily benefit too much from each other. And, you could say that the human economy benefits plenty from nature.
It's kind of an
not
exaction
so much the
process.
other way.
Yeah. So, yep.
So we started to bring in expertise, in certain horizontal alternative agricultural practice. Key lining was from Australia. P.A. Yeoman came up. He was an engineer and an excavator, and he came up with this certain kind of plow that doesn't turn the soil upside down, but it reaches down in and stimulates it and establishes an infrastructure on contour, right?
Okay.
So all my neighbors are corrugating downhill, which is erosion, and this is the exact. So we do everything wrong. So we plowed on contour to catch and harvest anything that fell on the land, and to utilize the water we did have and it actually started to light up the life in the soil. It was no longer just the top.
Okay.
Right? It was, and so we did physical things like that we tested.
Right.
We would invite the NRCS to these workshops. They'd never heard of key lining. They'd never heard, and they would be like, "You're building soil." We go, "Well, we can help you." And that's when we started to work together in about 2007.
Okay.
We got, first somebody gave us 6 or 8 cows, cattle, beef.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They were getting out of it, and they said, "Here, do you want them?" They donated, and so we said, "Okay, sure." And what we learned there is that we needed that major manure producer in the system.
Right.
Because a cow will produce twice the fertility that it eats or it consumes. They're giant fermentation tanks.
Okay.
So properly managed, moved every so often like in nature.
Right.
Under pressure of the coyote. The
Right.
buffalo would move around
Right.
and build fertility and not get back to that same place a year or two later.
Right.
And they'd be lush.
Right.
So we mimicked nature in how we mimicked nature in how we handled grazing.
Okay.
Stuff like that. This was pretty new. You didn't
Right.
see a lot of that going on very much. But this is why we were there. So we took chances like that.
Okay.
We got not one breed of chicken, we got 8, right? Diversity is
Right.
always the model. If anything ever came through there, like there's this new avian flu
Right.
thing, you know, you might lose one breed, but you're not going to lose all of them because they're
Right.
not all susceptible. Whereas that could wipe out 10,000 birds in a chicken house,
Right.
stuff like that.
Okay.
So we started to do that. Everything's always bring your grandkids, come look at the, you know, I don't know if it's petting zoo. We didn't encourage that. Face painting is illegal at sustainable settings.
Okay.
And if we're going to have pumpkin carving, we grow the pumpkins. Just saying.
Fair enough.
I don't need to go any further
Yeah.
with that. But it's, I mean, so we were testing things out and trying things. It was always, okay, here's how it's been done. It's not working. So let's not, as Rose says, make new mistakes. So let's try something different. And so it's a stewardship quiver, like arrows, right? And so if something worked, we'd put it in our quiver.
Okay.
And if it didn't, well, we didn't waste too much time and didn't hurt much.
Moved on.
Yeah,
So
because
to
it
the
was
next thing.
organic. We had ethics and principles that had to go through those filters. You know, if you said, hey, I want to come and spray Roundup, we'd go, that's okay.
Yeah.
I want to grow mushrooms, but I need to kill the ground, you know, first. No, that's the right thing.
Right. Yeah.
So we get ideas presented to us all the time. People see the land and hear about us.
Right.
But it has to kind of get through the...
So it's really a long-term commitment. I mean, you guys have been doing this for a long time on that piece of land. So and we've got another 10 minutes or 15 minutes
Okay.
or so. So talk a little bit about how
Future.
you, what it is that you've accomplished over that 20-year period, the arc of your work to get you to the intersection where we're at right now, where you've made the decision, your board has made the decision to sell, and then to use those resources to continue your mission somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, we have proof. We have the lab test. We have the empirical data. I mean, we don't, our marketing budget's zero. And we get animals in for, you know, cuts. The meat's gone, the eggs are gone, everything. We don't have any trouble moving anything we grow, all the veggies. And so that's evidence. You know, that's a proof. As much as more, if you ask me, the health of our animals coming off a pasture, that's evidence more than a lab test for me.
Sure.
I trust the cow, not a corporation.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yep.
And so we got that. And so I'm trying to write about what happened for us these last 2 decades in particular, but the whole time. And so it's time to share because it's working.
Right.
And so now we need, we've gotten to this point where we really need to, we need the financial fuel to move ahead. And it's, the decision is that we've healed this place. We've brought it up in vitality from industrial chemical abuse.
Right.
And now it's producing this bounty and this vitality. And so we need the funds we need housing for our people. You know, the farmer housing or ag housing in this valley is, I don't care how much we beat that drum, there's not enough of it.
Right.
And if we want to stick around here for a long haul and we want to eat, the county's got to wake up, all 3 counties got to wake up. And we've got to really have housing for the workers, for the people.
Right.
And so we need that. And, you know, that bugs Rose more than anything.
Right.
Just, you know, and we need to pay them a little better. They are learning, and then so they know that, you know, they're not paying a college education fee.
Right.
And they're there for, you know, grad school, so to speak.
Right.
So we need that, and we're 25 years old. It's time for an endowment to secure maybe $500,000 a year and a little bolstering for operational money.
Right.
Put half the purchase price. Maybe we could generate a little bit of operational funding.
Yeah. So you have sustainable steadings on the market now. The parcel is listed for sale.
That's right.
And the price that you've listed it at is.
Well, we're having a little. That's a project.
That's a discussion.
That's a campaign.
So work in progress.
This is a campaign.
It's a campaign.
So everything we do, of course, we do wrong. And so what we're doing is we opened at $24,250,000, which is $100,000 an acre.
Right.
I don't know where you can get. Where can you get an acre in this valley for $100,000?
Right.
We just happen to have 244.
Right.
So we think that we're on track. There are other listings in the area right now that are 130, and some are less. So we're not like breaking the barrier here. So we started with that, and so here we are. We're an educational institution as well. And so we didn't say sex.
Okay.
We said money.
Yeah.
Because the culture listens to money. So we're raising the price $250,000 a week. And people are all of a sudden reading about us and they're learning about what we're doing. Now, is that going to attract a buyer? I don't even care.
So at this point you're feeling as though your work on this parcel is done and you need to move to something new.
Yeah, it's as far as we can take it now with the funds we have.
Is there any certainty that whoever buys the parcel will perpetuate anything resembling what Sustainable Cities has been doing on it? I mean, there are limitations on its use, but you're not really anticipating somebody's going to come in and adopt your mission and continue to work the land the way that you have.
We have a following. Mm-hmm. I do consult, and I've just helped some Hollywood directors get some ranches in California.
Okay.
Identify them and help land them through the process. And so we have people that are hip to what we're doing. Okay. They've been to our workshops that have means.
Sure.
I don't know, but it would be ideal, of course, if they would at least. We've had a couple people say, hey, we don't know how to do what you've done. Would you stick around or would you consult with us for a year or two?
Yeah.
So that we could keep at least what you're doing moving along and stay in that. So we're talking, we haven't talked to anybody who wants to put in a polo field, but I don't think they could anyway based on the easement. So at the point of purchase with the Pitkin County Open Space and Trails, we co-authored that easement.
Okay.
And specifically, really, to our program. So housing and...
So the entire property has an easement over it that limits its use to certain...
So it's protected in perpetuity.
Yeah.
The value proposition in this deal is not that somebody could come in and subdivide it and put in, and develop it. It's locked up in that sense. It has.
The 35-acre parcels can't be brought back.
Well, you can only build on the southern 21 acres or whatever.
Right.
And there's limits on square footage, but you could build a home and a barn and have a place and But it's really, ideally for us, it'd be somebody that comes in and picks up these ag enterprises and keeps feeding the community. Mm-hmm. Yeah. High quality, nutrient dense food. Right. That would be the best. Right. We don't know where it's going to go. So the incremental climb in price might take us to, I think it's worth $33,333,333.33.
33 cents.
10-3.
I saw that in the newspaper article. I think it was.
And that might be absurd, but so we're in the process. It's caused a community concern, and there's some that get it, what we're doing, and they know we need to move on and we need to do our, sustainable settings, our connection to this place. So Woody Creek is 1.0. This Carbondale Ranch is 2.0, and we're ready for 3.0.
3.0.
And so look at it that way. We've got work to do.
You got to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
New challenges.
Demonstrate again. And we got a series of buildings that are a little bit different.
Right.
Built on geometries that are harmonic. You know, you can build a shitbox fiddle or you can build a Stradivarius.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
I know what a Stradivarius is.
Well, you know what a shitbox fiddle is.
I can guess.
You can guess. So we're looking at designing buildings that are actually charge your batteries.
Right.
Instead of drain your batteries.
Right.
So we've got work to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That sounds
Thanks
exciting.
for having us.
Yeah.
It's been good to see you.
Well, it's good to see you as well, and I certainly wish you all the luck in the world. This is, you know, I've been out, you know, to the ranch several times. We brought our kids out there when they were growing up. We've been to a couple of your harvest dinners, which were fantastic community events. So, in a sense, it's the end of an era for kind of the Carbondale area. Although, you know, nothing lasts forever. And so it's time, if you don't keep moving, you don't keep making positive change happen, you get stagnant, right?
Well, I'm a change agent. I don't sit around.
But yep.
One scenario might be that, you know, maybe the community all gets together and buys it for a community. You know, in other countries, you can't develop the arable land in Switzerland.
Right.
It's locked up into agriculture. They're smart.
Yeah.
We're not so smart.
No, we're not.
Maybe this is a chance to wake up. I figured there's 10,000 people in 81623. It would only cost them about $3,000 each to buy that collectively.
Yeah.
That's nothing. That's 1 month's rent in these new apartments.
Yeah, and you know, and you think about it with it, and that's 81623. You know, and of course the overlap here. You've got you know, you got 81611. You know, which you know, you're actually technically in Pickens County, even though you're closer to Carbondale, which is in a different county, which is in Garfield County. So the arbitrary lines, speaking of things that were done that didn't make sense in the past, you know, aren't really the relative factor here. It seems to me it's all about trying to knit the community together and have everybody see the value and the benefit of what you've achieved. So, congratulations on what you've achieved.
Well, it's been fun, and we don't know what else to do.
Yeah, well, I'll be at the end. You know, maybe once we get to the next stage, we can do this again. We can talk about what your plans are for the future. That'd be a lot of fun to do.
We're doing a land search now. We'll see. I brought a short video, about 6 minutes. Let's look at that, and then we can close.
The Roaring Fork Valley has been revered for centuries, first by the Ute people who came to these sacred Rocky Mountain valleys for the alpine summer bounty. Pikes Peak Gold Rush of 1858 brought out the first white settlers. It was Myron and Alex Thompson, father and son from Missouri, that were to run the famous jack trains, the only way to transport anything across the Rockies from the silver mining camps to civilization. Eventually, the Thompsons homesteaded in the Crystal River Valley, grew potatoes in the rich bottomland, and raised sheep in the high country. Alex settled on this ranch, now the home of Sustainable Settings. This is Sustainable Settings, a revitalized 244-acre working ranch with 90 irrigated and 154 wildland acres, high in this pristine Rocky Mountain watershed, one of few holdings remaining in agricultural production in a community of multi-generational ranches. The ranch is 5 miles from Carbondale's thriving downtown, 30 miles from Aspen's jet-served airport, and a 2.5 hours drive from the Denver International Airport. In 1997, the founders of Sustainable Settings came here to conduct an experiment to see if after 70 years of industrial chemical agricultural abuse, they could find a place and heal it. They set out to explore the relationship of soil health to our health. In the last 2 decades, they have pioneered and combined many stewardship practices. This research changed their thinking to be more aligned with nature. They discovered that nature was not only their measure, but their guide as well. The value proposition in the acquisition of this ranch is not measured in the typical dollar per acre exchange. This ranch is not valuable as a parcel that one could speculatively buy to subdivide for profit. This land is protected in perpetuity, a pearl in a strand of surrounding working ranches in this scenic section of the Crystal River Valley. This rare gem becomes more precious each year and will remain as you see it today forever in an agricultural open space. The value proposition here, then, is a profound hope to continue the preservation and regeneration of living soil, the bedrock of our health and well-being for generations to come. One key component of a successful ranch operation is water, and water is abundant here, with senior 1881 and 1890 water rights out of Thompson Creek and the Crystal River that feed the ranch-wide network of ditches. The Thompsons settled here at the confluence of two watersheds, guaranteeing this precious resource for all future endeavors. 3 wells source their pristine waters from the top of the aquifer for all ranch, residential, commercial, and agricultural uses. Now, with 7 consecutive years of upward trending NRCS scientific soil test data that measures the life in the soil, Sustainable Settings has reached their goals of healing this land. That, coupled with plenty of testimony from chefs and customers about the extraordinary, nutrient-dense flavor profiles in all their products, demonstrates that their collective stewardship practices have co-created the arena for optimum regeneration of soil life and health throughout the agrarian systems. The impressive uptick in soil life and overall fertility due to this group's biodynamic stewardship drives greater yields in nutrient-rich grass-fed butterfat in their A2 dairy products, proven increases in the overall health of their livestock, and a genuine terroir in their vegetables, making Sustainable Settings products a celebrated source of abundant life force. Building this vigor and immunity in the soil food web provides the optimum fuel for our resilience. It is hoped, then, that the next stewards recognize the uphill effort of the last 2 decades and know that they are inheriting peak health and vitality. This is the core of the values that make this ranch a gem. The ranch has developed micro-enterprises and niche markets, featuring their premium Beyond Organic biodynamic heritage meats, heirloom vegetables, and A2 dairy products. Their medicinal herbs sell out to apothecaries and healers within a 200-mile radius, which have 2 to 3 times the potency of other commercially available herbs. Since 2004, Sustainable Settings has been a leader in the farm-to-table movement, opening the ranch to corporate retreats and think tank events. Annually, they celebrate the bounty with their Harvest Festival, featuring guest speakers that are movers and shakers in the regenerative farming, local food, and health and wellness movements. These memorable events create unforgettable seasonal celebrations, give their stewardship research national attention, and drive sales. The property has all the support equipment you would expect on a working ranch. The list of improvements is impressive, with renovated and new practical ranch buildings designed and built to honor the historic Western vernacular, while being guided by their green building principles. Grid-tied solar electric and solar hot water arrays make this a run-on-the-sun operation. The surrounding mountain terrain is a hunting and fishing paradise for legendary big game and gold medal trout fishing and a premier destination for all outdoor activity. Finally, there are world-class Aspen Snowmass amenities with world-renowned skiing, legendary nightlife, premier restaurant culture, and classic annual events all within 30 miles. Come and be swept away by the result of years of faithful stewardship preserving the natural beauty of this 244-acre ranch. Sustainable Settings' holistic approach of farming with the wild is a proven model, making this land fruitful, self-sufficient, and a destination for extraordinary wildlife. This pristine Rocky Mountain Ranch sanctuary could be your opportunity to realize your dreams of building a legacy and returning to the land.
Yeah, great.
We'll be land-based again. Half of it will go into land, infrastructure and the other half into endowment.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Brook LeVan, we'll talk to you next time.